Good morning and welcome to another FasTrax webinar. This is a weekly event we do every Friday at 9 a.m. Central, 10 a.m. Eastern, where we go over various topics of the FasTrax software. You can see a list of these events if you go to our website, go ftx.com, choose the FTX Lifeline button, scroll down just a bit and look for that webinar button, choose that, and that will show you a list of all of our previous webinars, where you can choose the view recording option to view the recording, see the upcoming webinars where you can register and be reminded of that particular webinar, and then choose to subscribe to the newsletter to be notified of upcoming webinars and other FasTrax news. Today we're going to be talking about vendors and excise taxes. This is a feature that's been in the system for about 8 months now, but it's been added upon time and time again, so I figured we can go in detail on that. This would be perfect to use if you are, for example, maybe purchasing cigars directly from the manufacturer and you have to pay excise taxes. You're not paying those taxes to the vendor. So first and foremost, we have to enable that feature in the software. So in Director, you have to have the permission to change the settings down here in that bottom right corner, that settings hyperlink. So we'll choose that. We'll go to our Inventory tab. And then we want to make sure that the invoices enable excise tax is toggled to true. That first and foremost will make sure that the excise tax functionality is indeed enabled on Director. Then depending on your situation, if you want the excise tax to apply to your cost and your fees to apply to cost, as in like surcharges, we want to make sure that the fees apply to the item cost. Now, what this will do is if there's like a surcharge or a miscellaneous charge, in addition to that excise tax potentially being added to your cost, the fees are also enabled to be added to your cost. So after this is toggled on, you have to restart Director. I've already got that turned on for me. So then we want to go to the Maintenance module. And we want to go to the Vendors tab. Now the Vendors tab, this is going to be a list of all of your vendors you have that you can purchase from and receive invoices from. So in our world, we want to make sure that each vendor has a unique numerical ID. Then you want to make sure that you have the name assigned to that vendor. The other information, that's up to you if you want to have that input. That includes like your address for the vendor, city, state, zip, contact information. Now, if you're doing an accounting export, you want to make sure that they have an accounting code assigned to that particular vendor. That's how accounts payable would work. You'd be tied to that particular accounting code. And then the min amount field, that's going to be when you're making a purchase from this vendor, you have to have a minimum dollar amount. If you don't meet that minimum dollar amount, then when you're trying to complete that order, it's going to then prompt and say, hey, this order minimum threshold is not met. To the right of that, we have all the stores that are assigned to that vendor. And then below that, we have our checkboxes, the do not export. That's going to mean that this vendor is not going to be included on an export for your accounting export. Active, of course, means is that vendor truly active? If it's toggled off, then it's not active. And then the one we're going to be talking about today is enable invoice excise tax. I've got that set to true. So after we have our vendor set to true on our invoice excise taxes, we then need to turn that on the store level. So on our stores, we want to look to the right over here in this bottom right corner, and there's the option to enable invoice excise tax. So I've already got that set to true. Then we can choose our excise tax type. We can choose our excise tax value. In this case, I've got percentage set. So this is going to be a 10% excise tax charged on items. And then for my invoice excise tax, if that needs to be applied to my accounting exports, then this will be the excise tax name on those exports. And then finally, there's the option to toggle on, do you want to charge excise taxes on fees, like your miscellaneous fee or your surcharge fee? For example, if I have $1 on my surcharge fee and I have 10% as my excise tax, and I have that set to true, then of course I'm going to be charging 10 cents excise tax on that fee. If I have that set to false, then I'm not charging any excise taxes on fees. So I'm going to toggle that off and go ahead and save that. So now that we've got our store enabled for invoice excise taxes, we then need to look to our departments. This is going to be the items that are going to have the excise tax applied for them. So in this case, I've got my cigars. If we choose the department and we scroll down and we look, there's an Enable Invoice Excise Tax checkbox. So we want to make sure that's set to true on all departments that need to have items on invoices with an excise tax applied. In this case, I've only got my premium cigar department. So I'm only going to be charging excise taxes on those premium cigar items whenever I actually receive that into inventory for, in this case, store 1. Now, of course, this means you can have other departments that doesn't charge excise tax, and you can have plenty of stores that don't have excise tax enabled. So just because you have a vendor that's assigned to multiple stores, that doesn't mean that all stores that are inherited by that vendor are going to have excise tax charged. You can pick and choose which stores get that and which departments get that. Now, there's also one other level that if you wanted specific items to have excise taxes and not follow the department rule, you can do so. In your price book, when you search for an item, when you have that additional info, you choose that additional info tab, and then there's the override department excise tax. What this will do is items that are a part of, in this case, Department 46, we know that does not have excise taxes applied to it. If I toggle this to true, and then I enable invoice excise tax, that means that no items in Department 46, except for this one single item, will have excise taxes applied on invoices. So the opposite of that can be true as well. I could have a department that is toggled to have excise taxes applied, but then I could go to specific items and toggle that to where they don't have that applied to them, even though their department does have the excise taxes applied. So if Department 46 did have excise taxes being applied, then I could make sure that this override department excise tax is flagged is true, and I could uncheck that. So what that would do is that would basically say this item, even though every other item in this department is getting an excise tax applied, this item is not, because I'm overriding that and setting that to false. Okay, so let's take a look at excise taxes being applied on invoices. So I'm going to go to my inventory module here, and we're going to go to the receiving module, and we're going to enter in an invoice. And then now I'm going to add an item. This is a cigar item, so it's going to get an excise tax applied. If I put in 1, we can see here that there's my cost. There's the excise tax being applied. So then my total cost after combining the vendor part cost and the excise tax is now going to be $57.63 when you round up. So I can save and close. I can apply this to my inventory, and then that would then have this item being added to my inventory along with the excise tax being on the invoice. Whenever I put this invoice, we can clearly see that there is an excise tax being applied. There's my excise tax. There's that excise tax fee. So my grand total, if you have 100 items on an invoice and they all have excise taxes, you'll see the invoice totals, which will be your costs, and then you'll see the total excise taxes being applied, and then for a grand total of invoice cost plus excise tax cost. Now, let's go to this item in my price book real fast. I'm going to search by the vendor part. And let's just go ahead and set this to my vendor part cost. That last cost there. Notice whenever we apply an invoice, it's going to be adding in that excise tax to my last cost. There's my cost, $52.39. I'll save and close. I'm just going to go ahead and quickly apply this. When we go back to that item, oops, search by vendor part. Notice my last cost has been updated. My vendor part cost plus my excise tax cost. When those combine, that's my now new last cost. Now let's add a surcharge on. As we know, I have this setting turned on, fees apply to item cost. And I'm going to add one other setting here in the mix on my store. I'm going to charge excise taxes on fees. So let's go ahead and let's do another invoice here. I'm going to put a surcharge here. Let's add that same item. Now I'm going to print this out. Notice we do have a surcharge on here. So whenever I apply this now, and I'm going to print that invoice out, notice there's now a $58.73 total cost, not $57.63. That's because I have a $1 surcharge. Since there's one item on this particular invoice, that $1 surcharge is being applied to the total cost of that item. And then since there's 10% excise tax being charged, in addition to that being charged on top of the $1 fee, because I have that setting toggled on, it's essentially adding $1.10 to that cost. So instead of $57.63 as my total cost, when we look here in a moment, it's going to be $58.73. And there we go. There's my cost. When it rounds up, it's $58.73 is the total cost. So as we can see, our last cost will be updated appropriately based on excise taxes and fees being applied to that. Now, you can also do excise taxes in the POS if you're receiving invoices in the point of sale. And the same that we've already gone over also applies. So I'm going to log into my point of sale here. I'll go to my actions. I'll go to receiving. I'm going to create a new invoice here. I'm going to create that. Add an item, a vendor part. It's saying there's that vendor part. I'm going to choose yes. I'm going to put 1 here, and then there's my excise tax being applied. So no matter where you're going to be doing your invoice, if you have excise taxes toggled on, you can then do that. I'll apply that, and that will then update my cost. Okay, so I hope everybody learned something new today. Once again, these events are every week at 9 a.m. Central, 10 a.m. Eastern. You can see a list of all of our webinars if you go to goftx.com, choose the FTX Lifeline button, scroll down just a bit and look for that webinar button. On that page, you can see all of our previously recorded webinars, all of our upcoming webinars, and then sign up for the newsletter to be reminded of those webinars and other FasTrax news. If you have any questions on this topic, let us know at websupport@FasTraxPOS.com. And if you have any suggestions for future webinar topics, let us know at info@goftx.com. Thank you and have a great weekend.